let's just say welcome to the next episode of Declan. And we've got it's kind of a peculiar story, this, which we'll get into maybe as we start, but you'll see from the note that we've got Drew Rains on the podcast. Hello, Drew.
Hi, guys.
Yeah,
How are you?
And I got myself and Josh as the hosts. Hi, Josh.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Ray.
It's a pleasure, always. You know, you're here to be pilloried, and you serve that purpose very well.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Maybe as we can kick off with a bit of a story about like how I invited you onto this podcast, Drew, 4 years ago, I think. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago.
I'd have to check the Slack.
It's something like that. It's really a crazy timeline.
This is such a deaf-end thing to do, professional podcast here.
It was this weird thing where I was working at Vouch, I think I was working at, and we were looking at doing some mail stuff, and I came across your library that did mail with closure, and it was really impressive, and I thought, oh, this guy is, fabulous. It would be really great to have him on the show to talk about this stuff. And I reached out and there was absolute crickets, nothing, tumbleweeds. It was like, okay, well, that some fell on stony ground. My joke earlier on about the joke waiting for an audience. This was a message in a bottle out to Drew, And then finally, like with a long beard and shaggy clothes, this bottle finally arrived at the beach, or you came back to the beach, I don't know. And you hit me back up, and it was like, wow, okay.
Yeah, it was quite something. I was not I wasn't in the Closurian Slack instance very much, and I had some reason to check in there and saw your message, and I was actually just looking, and it was 2.5 years later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I responded, and you were still interested, so here we are.
And this is
fantastic.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, and like you were kind enough to send us over some kind of background notes from your life, which were 25 pages long. So thank you for being so thorough. And
absolutely welcome. Looking forward to getting it published at some point. But you guys,
yeah. Well, 10 out of 10, no notes. This is gripping reading. But I think actually we don't even need Ray on the show for this, because it sounds like you and I could just talk about how we did the same stuff as kids and as adults and are the same person, I think.
Proof that cloning works is that what it is? Yeah, I wrote up some kind of highlights, possible things to talk about, and Josh was like, wait a second. I'm from Virginia. I got into Closure at the same time. I also have worked in mail administration and all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was fun to see that.
Yeah. Fellow lover of Higher Order Perl, which is like one of my absolute favorite programming books of all time. So
yes,
just brilliant.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. MJD, if you ever listen to this, really
I'm sure he does.
I'm sure. Yeah. I shouldn't say if. When you listen to this, Mark, your fingerprints are all over this podcast.
This episode is also a message in a bottle, So who knows when it's going to reach him? Yeah.
Maybe we could email him.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was looking for an audience. It's still looking, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so you are from Virginia, but you were telling us you're in Nashville now.
Yes,
which
Nashville
is the home of country music.
That's right, Music City, USA. Many of your favorite artists either live here or pass through here quite often. So
yeah. Have you been to the Ryman Auditorium, I hope?
I have. It's a wonderful venue.
Have you ever played there?
I have not performed there. I'm not that good, but I have been there. It's a wonderful place. Encourage everybody to see a show there at some point in their life. Absolutely.
Is Ryman a person, or is it Is it
Yes,
a company or something, or what? What's the story?
So that too, yes.
Yeah, now it is. No, Ryman, he was what is his story? He was a captain of a ship, or owned a shipping company back in the 1800s.
Right.
And I can't remember the story. That's about it. I know that sounds
fine.
That was quite
this is great content.
Yeah,
let's move on.
I did not adequately prepare for Nashville trivia questions.
I mean, don't mention things you don't know the exact history of. I mean, please.
If you want to pause the recording, I'll go.
Okay, maybe we can just open the Wikipedia page now and just read it out. Well, really good content.
That's right.
Anyone that's interested can look it up. Yeah, actually, I was thinking when you first said it, I was thinking almost like Nashville. It's Ryman.
Ramen.
It's Ryman. It's Ryman, and
ramen.
it's kind of like it's Sliman. It's Ryman.
It's Taman.
Right. It's
good Taman
to my
for some ramen.
Or maybe I shouldn't mention Hyman. Okay, fine.
Yeah, Walter, fix that. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
No, but the Grand Ole Opry that you've heard of, Ray, I guess.
Pardon me?
You have heard of the Grand Ole Opry, I guess.
Me? No, I have not heard of any. I mean, I know about Nashville and country music and stuff like that, and I've heard. And I always, to be honest, I've kind of got probably one of my remaining prejudices is a kind of like don't like country music. But I've kind of been enlightened in recent years that country music isn't necessarily all bad. The DIV or RCE is not the let's say the pinnacle of all country music. Tammy Wynette was not the greatest ever, but there are better people.
Yeah,
maybe that's the wrong way of saying it. Not better people, but there are there's a more varied artist group in the country music set.
It's hard on.
I just have this feeling.
Wynette,
I don't know why, but I have this feeling that in the 50s or 60s. I mean, let's just get into it. I think country music had a reputation as being a white supremacist kind of bullshit bit of music. Justified or not, and I think that's being rehabilitated somewhat. Although I feel like Taylor Swift, for example, came up in the country, and then everyone was annoyed when she left, and it was like she was going woke or some shit, So I feel like there's still something problematic about country music. So I'll that's my reasoning for being hesitant about country music. So I'll let you guys, tell me why I'm wrong. It's a culture podcast, but we're going a bit country here. Yeah.
Well, country is varied, as is every genre. There's kind of the Appalachian bluegrass arm of country music. There's the pop end of country music, which is more, like today. That's definitely what I would call it. And then there's, just kind of the somewhere in the middle. I don't know, the rural kind of farm life, country music. I know it does have a history of being fairly white. But there have been, several black country artists. Charlie Pride's one of the most famous ones. Excellent artist. I think it's yeah, you could definitely have a whole podcast just on country music.
There's a lot of
moving on.
There's a lot of really good country music, is the point, Ray.
Yes,
and some terrible country music performed by terrible people.
Sure. Yes. I mean, I think Beyonce's country music album recently kind of tried to reclaim country music as a non-white space, which is interesting. Yeah.
She had a country album. This is news to me.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Keep up, Josh. Come on.
We'll go check it out immediately. So
hold the recording.
Next on this podcast about closure, Josh and Drew listened to a Beyonce country album.
I did look up Thomas Ryman. So he was not. It wasn't a shipping company. It was a riverboat company. Do you know what a riverboat is?
Freshwater, not seawater. I know what a riverboat is. Yeah. Okay. I mean,
there's a particular.
I've seen some examples of them.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, is it a steam one? Is it, or is it a paddle?
Yeah. Well, there's steam, and they have big old wheel in the back. And
I've read Mark Twain,
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But so anyway, Emacs is another thing that that you're
I know about as much of Emacs as I do about country music, so that's
or riverboats.
gonna go great. I've only used it for 26 years now, so
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think you're a couple years ahead of me. What year is it? I started using Emacs in 98. So whatever year.
Yeah, I was about
that's
2000. I think you're a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at me go.
99, 2000.
But
it's coming up to your 30-year anniversary, Josh, of being an
goodness.
Emacs user. Are you going to like break out some new keyboard chord or something?
Exactly. I'll write a beautiful eLisp package for Emacs to give it to on our 30th anniversary. It's going to be a beautiful ceremony, I'm sure.
Nice.
Wait, do people have ceremonies on their anniversary? I don't know. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
It's going to be
you
a party.
Could call it a ceremony. I mean, slightly weird, but
okay. But
right, let's get back on track. Yeah, I mean, because this podcast, by the way, I mean, you've probably heard a couple of episodes of this podcast, Drew, but it's famous for its
usually much more organized. I know you guys have some tight parameters that you operate in, and we're far afield. I get it.
Oh
yeah.
my goodness!
So maybe we should kick off with the old classic of yes, you're an Emacs guy, but when did you learn about the parentheses of closure? Because that's the real interest. That's what everyone's come here for.
That's right. That's the good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so Emacs, I think. Well, my first exposure to Lisp was actually in college in the late 90s, where I had a friend, Dave, who was a computer engineering major, as was I, but he was a few years ahead of me. And in the computer engineering coursework back then, you took an artificial intelligence class, and that class was taught using Common Lisp, and he would complain about it. Yeah, poor Dave was not an enthusiastic computer programmer. I really don't to this day understand why he was in that major. He's a wonderful person, but you would not talk to him and be like, this guy really should be, a software engineer. But so he would complain about it, and that was about all I knew. I was sort of in the systems world doing Perl and things like that. And I was like, oh, okay, so Lisp must be pretty grueling. And then, years later, I was getting into Emacs for reasons we can go into, but that was kind of my gateway into Lisp, and I just really fell in love with really the homo iconicity of it. Just being able, just cutting straight to the chase, writing code in a data structure. I'm like, this is beautiful. Like, why have I never heard of this before?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
The scales fell from your eyes.
The clouds parted, life made sense. And so really but I wasn't like shipping software with Emacs, right? Like I was enjoying using it and hacking on my .Emacs instead of getting real work done.
Yeah, we've all been there.
And then I got into functional programming, and from there, a couple of years later, it's probably around 2007. This guy named Rich Hickey posted a message to this forum back then called Lambda the Ultimate, which I think it's actually still around. I'm not sure how much it's maintained, but he posted that he had created this language that was on the JVM, which I had not had great experience with Java, because back then Java was terrible, and it was functional in nature, mutable data structures. And it was a Lisp. And I said, well, this seems interesting. let me give it a try. At the time, I was also working on a sort of a reporting tool it was in Python. It was pulling data from a database, and I was sort of aggregating and counting a bunch of things and ship it to different people in the company I was working for. And it was super slow. This was back when I mean, Python's never been like crazy fast, but it had even fewer, sort of async and parallelization primitives, and so writing concurrent Python was not really fun back then, and so um, I was like, well, why don't I try this Lisp out? I dabbled in it and like, oh, this actually works. The REPL works, and like I can do things in it. So then I just kind of progressively started doing more things in it. And so I was like, okay, why don't I try porting over this, this Python that I'm working on literally, day to day right now. And I mean, I kid you not, I probably, I had a fully concurrent, version of it working in probably a couple of days. Like I was just blown away that I could write something so non-trivial trivially. like the impact, like the type of program that I wrote, right, was not hard to do in Clojure, but it was when I look back and I'm like, um, being able to stream data in parallel from a database, like back then, it just like even Java, you didn't have this is before Java 1.5, like you didn't have Java util concurrent. I mean, like if you wanted to do anything with anything in parallel, I mean, you were breaking out threads and you were like syncing your own state and you were doing a lot of painful things. And so this was, this was really eye-opening for me. And I just want to say, like, I realize Rich is standing on the shoulders of giants too. It's not like he
Sure.
invented these things, but he really he really solved a major problem, which is he decided to take a Lisp, make it a hosted language on a ubiquitous platform, and make the interop seamless, and use functional primitives to like make it super easy to reason about and make it super useful and practical. Like it really just is such a wonderful creation. So I was hooked from that point on. We ended up writing some more Clojure at that company, and eventually I joined the first sort of like large, and I'm doing air quotes because you don't really need a large Clojure team, but this is like, it was like 8 or 9 or 10 folks at a very early startup that basically they were, building a Clojure team to solve a hairy backend data problem, and several of those folks are still and good friends today. I mean, it was a wonderful team. Thank you, Tim Deisinger, for pulling us together. Love those guys.
Nice. And what was that company doing where you had the enormous Clojure team of 8 or 9 people?
Yeah, right. So that company was called Sonian, and it was an early Amazon funded startup in the information retrieval space for e-discovery, which is basically discovery, like legal discovery. If you're going to litigate in some fashion and you need to find a bunch of documents related to your litigation, you go through a discovery process. What that meant as far as software goes was it was basically a search bar, and you go in there and it searched a bunch of email attachments that we had indexed. That's the short version. But on the back end, they sort of did so this was the early days of AWS. I think they started around the same, maybe a couple years after. I think AWS started in 2004 or 5, something like that. And this company, I think, started in 2006. It was a top 5 user of AWS. We had almost a petabyte of data when I joined, which was just a massive amount of data for that time. So we were really, really stretching S3, stretching EC2. There weren't a ton of, that's about that. I think SQS, maybe a few other products back then. AWS was not as full of a platform as it is today. And so so they had built before I joined, kind of got it off the ground and bootstrapped it with I think it was like a Ruby on Rails app, and they had used Ferret, which was this Ruby library, which is I think an abstraction over Lucene, and that wasn't scaling in the way that they wanted. So the VP of engineering at the time, who was Tim, I mentioned earlier, he said he also found Clojure and had a similar reaction. He's like, I'm gonna go all in on this and try it out. And so he started hiring a few folks from the Clojure community, and basically to rewrite that back end in what was essentially a distributed, indexing engine. We had workers that like imagine like cloud computing is brand new, like launching an EC2 instance with code. This is just like, what are the things you can possibly do with this, right? Like that was everybody's reaction.
Right.
And so, dynamic workers, like, firing up a machine and firing up hundreds of them in the cloud at once and distributing your workloads. I mean, that was like so fun, right? Because it was so possible. I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was possible, which was fun.
Yeah.
And so, we had this whole system that would, we had collectors that would collect the email, and then we'd fire off workers to, actually parse the attachments out and extract text from the PDFs, and then we would throw all that stuff in RabbitMQ, and then we had other machines that would take those, take the text, and we would index it into, basically we started just talking to Lucene directly, and then we were experimenting with Solr, which was an open source search library that was very popular at the time, and it's still around. But its ergonomics were a little rough around the edges back then. And so that actually led to the next sort of phase of my journey, which was Elasticsearch, because we were essentially distributing Lucene, and that's essentially what Elasticsearch is. And with some really great APIs on top of it. And so all of that was made possible with Clojure. Everything from the text extraction to the indexing to the well, I guess that's about where it stopped, because the front end was still, I think, Rails. All of our sort of provisioning and systems stuff was Chef at the time. So it's still very, very Ruby land. So we kind of hadn't spread Clojure further than the kind of central system.
So how did that, thinking about, maybe it wasn't around at the time, but I feel like it was. How does that like compare to the Hadoop architecture? I'm pretty sure Hadoop was around about that time.
Oh yeah, because definitely was.
Hadoop was very much around. Yes.
Yes, because this is, obviously Hadoop was this sort of whole MapReduce thing.
That's right.
Which was itself designed to do exactly what you said, So why did you do this rather than that? I'm kind of always interested in like,
trade-offs, choices.
Why did you like, the thing is sitting right there, it's a JVM thing, but it obviously was, it was issues, that's it. But it was very popular, amongst a certain, amongst the industry, really. It was a popular thing. So I'll stop blah 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 and just let you answer the question as to why you went a different way.
That's good, actually. Thanks for that, because it gave me some time to think of an answer.
Yeah.
I actually don't know. So we started that journey pretty soon, or I think around the time I arrived. So and I was I was much more junior person back then. I wasn't asking those kinds of existential questions. I also didn't know much about Hadoop. I knew it existed, right? I mean, this was still in the days where the Google like paper about MapReduce wasn't that old.
Right.
So I think, Hadoop existed, but like Solar, like a lot of those early Java projects, like just the ergonomics were terrible. Like you couldn't. It was so heavyweight, and so I would venture to guess that people don't come to Clojure because they love complexity. I'll just say it that way.
Yeah.
So I would Phil Hagelberg and Tim and folks that were there a little bit before I was. Steve Gilardi, Dan Larkin, these guys. I'm sure they were like, I think we can probably do something slightly simpler than Hadoop. And to be honest, like it probably was. I mean, it wasn't a trivial code base by any stretch of the imagination, but distributing the work across machines like really wasn't the hard part of
right.
architecture.
I mean, if you're using SQS, you can do it like that, and then you can just pick up the work and report back, etc.
Yeah. Well, we were using Rabbit, so actually that's
Rabbit as well.
A question I still have. I need to ask them. It's like, why didn't we just use SQS? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it kind of depends on what you were doing, because Rabbit can be fully persistent as well, like unlike SQS. So Rabbit has a lot more capabilities.
So. Yeah, I suspect that is a big part of it. Plus Erlang.
Plus Erlang. Yep.
Yeah. You just you gotta put some Erlang in there.
Maybe SQS was still a bit like new and rough around the edges and stuff like that.
Well, I think SQS was it the second service? Was S3 first and then SQS or something like that?
EC2 and S3 were the first,
yeah. Well, the very first AWS service was none of those. It turns out it was a product catalog service, as the very first Amazon mobile website actually consumed this XML API and used XSL or
Amazon Archive.
Yeah, whatever. XML transforms to generate, WAP and HTML. It was good stuff.
That sounds beautiful.
Are you allowed to say WAP these days?
I think you can say WAP. Yep.
Okay.
It doesn't surprise me that it's like a basically a service registry.
Yeah, but yeah, that went away a long time ago, and S3 is the first like official AWS service as we know AWS today.
That sounds right.
Yeah. So Elasticsearch, you said you eventually okay. Yes, Ray, thank you. Ray is just texting away here in the background, making fun of me for being ignorant about music. That's cool. The important question is, you said you eventually moved to Elastic.
You're not breaking the fourth wall there, Josh. You should just break it now.
All right. Don't worry, Welter will fix that. None of this will be in the episode, I'm sure.
Thank God.
It never is. Elasticsearch, though, we wanted to talk about that, right? Because you mentioned it, and you also spent quite some time there, I guess.
Yeah, I was at the company for 10 years, plus the 2 years before the company was founded. So yeah, but basically what I said before was that we were, distributing Lucene, and around the time that we were, sort of figuring out how we would do that, and we, wrote a few POCs and played with it. This guy SHA Banon, who's an Israeli developer, he had released this thing called Elasticsearch, and it was actually February of 2010. So it was exactly 15 years ago. And it, brand new thing with, one guy wrote it. It's like, this is, it seems like we need to let it bake a little bit before we start using it, but it's pretty compelling. I mean, Shai spent a long time putting a lot of useful APIs into it. He solved some like sort of core distributed systems problems, but he really put such a useful veneer over it. He having like the power of a system like that with RESTful, consumable JSON based APIs, like that actually was innovative at the time. And it was all non-blocking IO. It was super fast. and it had geospatial features. I mean, it had facets and all kinds of things that exposed from Lucene. So it was a very robust piece of software that just commanded us to really take a look at it. And so eventually we decided, speaking of engineering trade-offs and decisions, we decided that, if let's invest in this rather than, trying to make our own thing while this matures. We can sort of partner up with SHA and benefit both of us. And so that's what we did. And we, basically we're the first kind of large user of Elasticsearch. We weren't the first users. That title goes to a guy named Clint Gormley, who's a longtime friend and early Elastic guy as well. But we were really the ones that really put it through its paces, and also stumble upon. I should give them some credit. They were also big users at the time. I think they were a little bit after us, but we started indexing all of our stuff into Elasticsearch, which, as I said, was almost a petabyte of data. By the time we actually got it all in there, it was probably a petabyte. And that was, of course, we used several clusters for that. It wasn't one cluster, even though we could have put that in a single cluster. Any just operationally, any large system, we kind of sharded it out further from the single cluster. But it was great. We found a lot of bugs in Elasticsearch, found a lot of bugs in EC2, and we were using EBS, like the magnetic EBS back then.
Yeah.
Because that's all there was, which was notoriously, I hate to say unreliable, because like it's cloud computing, right? I mean, it's you kind of expect machines to come and go, but with really large heavily stateful, instances of a system like that, interruptions and IO problems can wreak havoc, especially with the JVM, because if it hits latency or it runs out of memory, then you get like weird network errors where nodes like sort of are half up. They like don't die all the way, but they're not responding to requests. And so we had all kinds of fun things that we found, and got to work closely with SHA to fix. And so we contributed a lot back to the code. So it was really a great partnership. It was kind of the beauty of open source and commercial adoption, right? Kind of bi-directional value. It was great.
So what was the closure part of the Elasticsearch story then?
So that was largely the same as what we were doing before. So that we were just indexing into Elasticsearch instead of directly into Solar or Lucene. Yeah.
But then you joined Elasticsearch itself, the company, right? At some point.
I did. Yeah. Right. So it was founded in April of 2012, May of 2012, something like that, and then I joined in November. That's right.
And there was.
And did they have a closure story at Elasticsearch? Elastic?
They didn't. And it's funny because I don't think SHA really actually liked closure or that much. I think he was intrigued by it, and certainly the community, adopting it. And we actually wrote an Elasticsearch client in Clojure that we never released, which is kind of one of the ironic parts of my journey. But wrote a lot of kind of internal tooling with it in the early days. Some of that stuff I think is still around today. A lot of our the way that we some of our KPIs were around downloads, of course, because that's we were an open source business at the time. And so like the way that we aggregated that data was some Clojure that I wrote. Some of our first downloads infrastructure was actually Clojure, and I used Palette. So shout out to Hugo and Tony for a great an amazing ecosystem of libraries. I wish it would have taken off and taken over the world, but it's super fun. We ended up migrating that to Puppet eventually when kind of hired some other folks. But yeah, Clojure was a power tool in the early days of Elastic, and really helped bootstrap the company. I mean, to be honest, one of the tools we wrote was so we used Jenkins for our CI, but we didn't love like the Jenkins-y ecosystem of plugins, and like when you upgrade Jenkins, it's like a nightmare. So it's really reliable for just like, I need to run a thing on a schedule. It does really well at that. But once you start trying to write plugins and stuff, it's just it's hairy. So we said, well, let's just rely on the sort of shell out functionality of Jenkins, and then we can do a bunch of fancy stuff after that. And so we had this wrapper that was essentially it was a Clojure program, and it was essentially it would spawn a process to run the whatever the build script was for the thing that we were building. But then while it did that, it captured telemetry from the child process. So and then shipped that to Elasticsearch. So it was this shim in between, kind of the scheduler and the real build. So the thing that you would run on your laptop or something. It worked really well, and we used that. I mean, I think we finally migrated to. Well, we expanded to like 16 or 17 different Jenkins clusters for different slices of the company, and that was running a lot of it. And then eventually we adopted BuildKite, which is a great company. Shout out to the BuildKite folks.
Imagine that your CI is on 16 clusters, though. I mean, it just goes to show that's where you're starting to scale stuff. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, we hired a wonderful guy named Aaron Bull Schaefer who was just like a Jenkins and an Ansible wizard. And so like you put those together, and he was like, how many clusters do you need and by when? That's great.
Oh my. So also in your bio, there's another thing you and I have in common, which is some point you decided to become a manager. I guess you lusted after power and wanted to.
That's exactly right. I always wanted to tell other people what to do, and it's been great.
How's that working out?
People love to be told what to do. It was a great,
especially programmers.
Yeah. So we, So the Elasticsearch company and community is full of brilliant people, and I was not one of them. So they were, we were like, what are things that Drew can continue to do that are valuable at this company? Because we really don't need to write any more code. Please don't. And he's not a great Java programmer, so don't let him touch Elasticsearch. Although I did inspire the Cat API, which is probably my most famous contribution to Elasticsearch. SHA actually did a lot of the heavy lifting as far as turning it into an API in Elasticsearch, but the idea and the format and all the stuff came out of the way that I was administering the clusters at Sony and at the company before. And so
what is the Cat API?
Oh, so the Cat API, yeah. So well, I'll get back to your other question here in a second. The Cat API is it was the answer to like somebody who does a lot of command line sort of Unix administration. Really doesn't love JSON. Like it's great. It's great to have at least some structured format, but us Unix people, like we want white space and lines and pipes and all kinds of things, right? So I had basically written some translation code to take the JSON based Elasticsearch APIs and translate them into line based column columnar kind of looking things so that I could use tools like, sort and grep and fun things like that. So, so SHA being very much, an expert in Java and distributed systems, not as much an expert on, Unix and large scale systems administration. He's like, I think we need to add that, as a feature, as an API in the software. I was like, that's a great idea. Let's do that. So normally, like when you see, it's a very common tool now in order to just do basic tasks like, seeing how much data you have, how many shards do you have, how many nodes do you have, what's your JVM heap, all these kinds of things that you just are pretty common to do while you're looking after your Elasticsearch clusters.
Because I was thinking that it might have been something to do with like cats and dogs, because they're the most popular things on the internet, So it was like a specific API to search for cats.
Yeah, right.
In Elasticsearch, but yeah, that was funny.
Okay. I think it should. I think it should do that. Although, if you go to just the cat endpoint without anything else, it will show you an ASCII picture of a cat.
All right,
of course.
Okay. Oh,
Excellent.
Perfect.
But yeah, it was just kind of a nod to the cat util on Unix.
Yeah.
It's a nice short name too. SHA was brilliant at the branding. So your question was about management. Let's see. So yeah, they were
herding cats, if you will.
Yeah. So you're like, okay, clearly that's the best thing this guy can offer from a software standpoint. So let's see if he can, actually talk to people and manage a team. Basically, we had we had our product teams like Elasticsearch and Kibana and Logstash and as we grew, we had more and more products. There is but there's a lot of engineering that happens underneath the surface to glue things together. And so we had kind of, I mentioned the tools a minute ago that I had developed, and then there were some other folks working on, other sorts of tools in the infrastructure space. So my boss asked if I wanted to sort of gather all of those folks together and lead a team around that. So we called it the infrastructure team, or the infra team for short. That was kind of a home for a lot of like polyglot, multidiscipline folks. And so we solved like all kinds of problems from running a globally distributed tile service for our maps functionality, to continuing to like expand our build infrastructure, to making sure that users could download Elasticsearch, running the release process, and eventually we collapsed all of the products into a single versioning scheme, and so we would release them all together. So that process was kind of built out of our team, and then we were the do all team. If you had an issue, if you needed a kind of a supporting service for a product, we were usually the team to make it happen. So we're kind of a very much an SRE like team. We'd build, and then eventually we didn't call ourselves at the time because it wasn't as much of a buzzword. We were a platform team. So we, when Kubernetes became kind of the clear winner in the container wars, we started offering that as an internal service. So we had a ton of Kubernetes clusters that we ran different things on, and eventually ran part of our build infrastructure on that, and we would give different clusters to different product teams for them to write their own automation and that kind of thing.
Small aside there, Drew, since
Yes.
Since you say it's the clear winner in the container wars, I have a feeling that those wars are not over.
Yeah, was that too provocative of a statement?
No. I think you're right that it felt that way. Definitely, It felt that way 5 years ago, or maybe even 7 or 8 years ago. But it feels like feels like it's just growing and growing and growing to the point where it's like bloated to the, it's like it's
Yeah.
almost gone topsy,
Right. Yeah. There's a lot going on there. And I won't even pretend to act like I am up to speed on it. But yeah, I mean, this is probably 10 years ago. Um,
right,
and
yeah.
it was, Kubernetes and Nomad and some of these other kind of orchestration suites. And um, Kubernetes was clearly gaining a lot of interest just with its is the kind of the Go influence, and then obviously Google being beneath both of those. You could kind of tell where the wind was blowing, and then so we were actually big Google Cloud users, and they came out with GKE, their Kubernetes engine, and it was like the most vanilla Kubernetes of the of all of the platforms, all the cloud companies. So um, they did a really good job of exposing Kubernetes as kind of a hosted service. And so we were able to really let them do a lot of the heavy lifting. We could just kind of
Right.
provision clusters at will. And so I would say that's, the biggest reason why we got hooked on it was just GKE. It was a really good way to meet our users' needs.
And did you actually run your own clusters eventually, or was it always on the cloud?
So the company went through an interesting transition. We acquired a cloud, basically a startup called Found, a Norwegian company that had built a container orchestration engine with Elasticsearch at the center of it. Sorry, I said that wrong. Elasticsearch was not the orchestration engine. It was built for hosting Elasticsearch nodes, which you could assemble into a hosted Elasticsearch platform. And so they would that eventually became what today is the Elastic Cloud product. And so that was not at the time written in Kubernetes. So we had sort of two internal orchestration platforms for a long time. Ray, I can't remember your question now. What did you ask? Why did I start talking about that?
It was about whether or not you ran your own Kubernetes clusters, or whether you always used the cloud versions of these things.
That's right. So for my team, we ended up just relying on GKE because it works so well. But yeah, the reason I started talking about the cloud platform, the Elastic Cloud platform, is because that was not written in Kubernetes initially, but later became more Kubernetes like. And then in recent years, there's been a kind of a replatforming to put Kubernetes underneath it.
Now, Elastic is famously upset about cloud providers stealing its revenue. Is that something that is open to you talking about, or is that something which is like above your pay grade or not interesting?
Yeah, I mean, we can try it. I can I can vamp on it for a minute and see what we end up with. But so there was yeah, I don't know how. Yeah, Amazon like to host open source software and make money from it. I mean, legally they could, right? I mean, it's a pretty shrewd business move. And to be fair, in some cases they were pretty active in communities and gave back. But they certainly it felt to us at the time that they could have partnered with us more than just sort of cannibalizing it. And I think that ended up in kind of the fruit that you see, right? There was kind of fragmentation, and you ended up with the OpenSearch fork and all kinds of things. Yeah, it's and the re-licensing of Elasticsearch. It's a very interesting thing, right? And it really was made possible. Open source enabled cloud computing, and then cloud computing
definitely
kind of starved open source in some cases.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, now you have Elastic Cloud, right? So you have your own kind of SaaS offering for Elasticsearch. But I mean, that I have some experience with Elasticsearch, enough to know that, like, as we say, one does not simply deploy an Elasticsearch cluster, right? Like, it does take a little care and feeding. And so, I can see the benefit to people of just wanting a hosted one that's, at least takes some of that stuff off your plate. Of
Yeah,
course,
absolutely. The functionality provided by both services is
Mm, mm,
wonderful. Like if you want to use Elasticsearch, I yeah, having a hosted version is wonderful. I think uh, I can't remember now what you said in your answer there, Josh, that made me think of what I was going to say next.
well,
Um,
you can just say what you were going to say next, and it'll be fine.
I'm wondering, maybe it's like as a sort of segue to something else. Is like, or a more general point is whether this is sort of prefigurative of the the thing that we had the problem with recently with HashiCorp, where they wanted to have Terraform. And again, Terraform was this thing where they wanted to keep it to themselves and not have third parties like essentially eat their lunch. Other people argued, well, actually, we don't really steal from you. We're not really, we're giving back and blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of like this balance seems to be, or it's an interesting balance as to whether users of the software owe anything to the creators of the software. Um, whether fairness matters.
right.
I think that's the kind of like essence of this problem, I think, is this concept that where you give out this open source, you explicitly say that it's as is, it's available and usable for commercial purposes. So how can you complain? Um, and it's a fair question, I think.
It is.
But I think also people do put a lot of effort into these things, and to see a third party kind of like just essentially take advantage of that situation rather than let's say, like you say, honor that the inventor, or kind of like at least share some of the benefits, it's cruel in some ways, but it's also it's kind of like it's like a mafia type thing. It's just business. But it really is. I mean, that's exactly how the country is run these days. I mean, I don't know if you've seen, but it's just business. It's just
Yeah.
business.
Well,
I
I
thought you were going to say it would be a shame if something happened to your Git repo, but
so,
sorry,
so
you had a serious point.
no, well, I mean, it's yeah, thinking about HashiCorp and their decision, and it's similar. I mean, you know, the best thing for software you love is for it to live, and sometimes that happens because you have a benevolent dictator that can fund their life in some other way, and they can donate a lot of their time to continuing to offer the software that you love. Um, in other cases, a project dies because it doesn't have that support. And then the other option is, sort of you have this relationship, a corporate relationship, where either a business is sort of donating that work to the community, um, or it is, requiring some kind of, payment to use it. So it's not inherently evil or good in my mind. I think it can be done, poorly or well. I don't really have a I think when you see changes like with Terraform and with Elastic, it's because businesses are wrestling with this, right? I know very well that the heart of Elastic is deeply an open source
Yeah.
DNA, and like if every every founder and developer at that company would love to give it away, for free. But at the end of the day, we have very large, important segments of our economy that run on software, and like these um, enterprises come looking for a commercial relationship that they can make sure that the thing that
Sure.
they
Yeah.
depend on has some security behind it to keep living, and to be able to get support when they need help, and all those kinds of things. And that's a beautiful thing, because it provided me meaningful employment, and it was a fun company to work at. So like, I'm grateful for it. I think the other aspect of it is, uh, and I realize, the cloud providers are unicorns here. Like it's hard to generalize too much, but because they control so much of the sort of the IT spend, market share, like they are very relevant. And I think the question is, can AWS effectively offer every kind of product? Can they be experts in all of these disparate platforms? And I think, I mean, anything, I guess, is possible with enough time and money, and certainly Amazon has deep pockets. Um, but when when you are trying to host software that already exists, the community and the users and the dependencies, or the things that depend on it, they're all needing it to fulfill not just its sort of software contract, but there's all kinds of things that go into actually helping software live in the wild. And it comes down to community, it comes down to how you get support, it comes down to conferences around it. I mean, all the kinds of things that you and I know so well, just being in the Clojure community. Even one of the most valuable companies in the world, can it effectively do that for all of these products? And I think, I don't want to, I don't want to disparage the OpenSearch folks, because I think they've put in a lot of their own, labor into that. But it's really hard to, kind of keep a thriving community going with, a sort of segment of a large company, right? Where you just got kind of a product champion and maybe a few developers, and like that thing could go away at any time. I mean, how many things have we? There's the famous Google examples of Reader and everything else. They're in the graveyard now. So I think that they're realizing, that you can't just, offer all of these types of disparate products without potentially losing the fidelity and the quality that folks are expecting from it.
Yeah, but I think to your point, they wanted to own the space. They saw that search is valuable because obviously Google is a search company. Amazon is a search company as well to some extent. Their catalog is basically a search engine.
Yeah,
That's right.
I worked on the search team at Amazon as well.
I have some friends on that team, which is separate from AWS, and some brilliant search engineers. I think that, oh shoot, I've gotta like take my ADHD medication or something. I had a point when Ray was talking, and then I totally lost it.
Well, I was talking about the fact that they want to own the space, and it feels, and they have their own search products, and they've. I'm just kind of wondering, again, from a commercial perspective, probably Elastic felt a little bit like they were closing down the possibilities for Elastic to exist, and that probably feels a little bit wrong in inverted commas, even though it's just business. It feels like, well, how are you going to, like you said, how are you going to like keep this product alive if we can't actually survive?
Right. Yeah. And I think, I don't necessarily think it was anything nefarious. I mean, I think it was, some folks that felt like they could build a successful product for AWS, using, standing on the shoulders of Elasticsearch, and
Sure.
and they had some level of success at that, even though it eventually shut down. I think that this is an example of in large corporations where the right hand and the left hand don't really either talk or necessarily need to talk. But Amazon was making it does make a tremendous amount of money from Elastic Cloud, so the actual Elastic Cloud product.
Right.
One of the providers is AWS, and people who are AWS customers come to Elastic and they want to buy hosted Elasticsearch because it's in AWS, and it's in their region, and they can talk to it with low latency and all those kinds of things. So, um, there's a very healthy relationship on that side of the house that they could have just left that one to flourish and not tried to go in these other directions. But again, large business is gonna, of course, have as many revenue streams as they can. And try
but it feels a bit like I mean, and again, maybe I'm sort of over dramatizing it a little bit, but like open source and this because we talked about when Red Hat went IPO'd for Linux, it was like the biggest IPO in history, I think, at the time. Clearly, that's been superseded, but it was a huge thing. And now Red Hat is owned by IBM, and it's it's weird, but so like Linux became like an enterprise thing, and then an enterprise company bought that thing, and so it feels a bit like there's this sort of commercial open source and open source. Like obviously Amazon make a lot of money out of Linux. EC2 is basically Linux. They have their own version of Linux even, but it doesn't really matter. The main point is that the Linux community doesn't care. They don't care that Amazon are making any money, Google are making money, Android, Apple, everyone. Linux doesn't care about the commercial aspects of this thing. But companies like HashiCorp, Elastic, I think there was another one, Redis, I think recently as well. There are various companies looking at this model. It just feels like once you go into like the commercial open source world, which, I mean, to some extent, people don't like to have code that's not open source anymore. So it's almost like an obligatory thing to have your code open source. Then you're going to have it potentially, used by people who are going to compete with you.
Yeah, well, I think technical people, I think developers are just always going to default to open source because it's it's the thing that gives us the most control. We're under, if we're part of a business, we're under tight deadlines. If we're doing stuff on our own, we just want to build cool stuff. And open source is a great way to solve both of those problems. And
view source, yes, please.
Yeah, right. So democratization of software and just going straight to the source. I mean, it just alleviates so much extra. It shrinks the feedback loop down so small that it's just an efficient way to do things. It's also
even if you don't fix things or contribute, you know how to work around the problems because you know what the problem are. You know what the problem is. Yeah.
It's also a wonderful way to run an engineering organization. That's how we, that's how we sort of organized at Elastic, But at the end of the day, like somebody's got to fund things, and
definitely.
I think founders that are technical, they're gonna want to have as much open source as possible. But at the end of the day, you've got to raise money, you've got to sell a product, and so how can you sort of let your your source itself not be the product? I mean, that's really it's why services became a money stream, and we stopped selling boxes of CD-ROMs, right? Because people just want stuff on demand. They don't want to pay necessarily big contracts. They just want to pay for something and start using it. And so open source kind of is somewhat ancillary, and I think a lot of at this point, and so a lot of companies that get started from the open source thing very quickly you have to figure out what your revenue streams are going to be.
Man, that's a heady discussion. I just want to say that I'm 100% on the side of HashiCorp here. Like, I think it's fine for them to want people to pay for licenses for their stuff, but that's because I am a capitalist to my last bone, as everyone everyone knows.
I mean, it's extremely impressive. They have been through so many generations of the company with so much stuff being freely available.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the landscape of what they offer, the vast majority of it is still free, open source, and very useful, right? Like you can do a lot before you get to the enterprise tiers.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I guess I'm looking at this through the lens of somebody who's worked at very, very profitable companies, and it always just bugs me a little when these companies with more money than God are just like, oh no, we're not going to pay $100 a year license, and it's like, come on.
Yeah.
So anyway, but
Sure.
We're back to management, maybe.
Back
Josh.
to management. Yeah, speaking of management, obviously at the company where I'm a manager, we pay $1,000 a day licenses for all software we use. That's just my policy. But yeah, so like, what was it like to go into management? Like, if you can kind of think back 11 years ago or whenever it was you said, do you recall what that was like?
Going into management?
Yeah. Like, what was the mind shift you had to make?
Yeah. Well, I did feel like I was, the kind of reluctant manager. I think, Steve Jobs kind of describes it that way. I like we were joking before, like I really didn't want to have any sort of power. And I didn't necessarily think I was, good at it, but I did have this desire to give engineers a good manager, and to solve problems broadly for, the company, and provide input into, hiring and staffing, and how we build, and what we build. So I definitely felt, like leadership was, or people leadership, I should say, was something that I could um, could pursue. Um, and it turns out that like um, a lot of management really is motivating people, and it's inspiring folks, and um, I think that I had enough ability to sort of connect the art of programming, the discipline of programming, with business problems, and give connect with engineers on a deep level, deep technical level, but then help them map map business problems to interests and abilities. And so that once I sort of tasted some success at that, I felt almost like a burden to do it, and probably is why I'm still doing it today.
Yeah. I think that's interesting, because I think about my job really as being an information conduit. So
Mm.
trying to capture the context of whatever is important to the business, and then talk to engineering teams with that context so that we can find the right trade-offs, basically. Is
Yeah,
that I'm thinking back to, there have been so many times when I was an engineer, and I was just so focused on the technical solution, right? Like, we have to do it this way because it is obviously better, but obviously better for what, right? And that was that's why I think a good manager can actually help by giving engineers the type of information we actually need to make good decisions, because
that's right.
otherwise you're kind of in a vacuum. But
Yeah, I mean, being able to, translate requirements into just enough specificity that they're clear, with enough freedom to where engineers really can have the space to explore, really good solutions to problems. It's really gratifying, and I realize that not all of that's like an EM's role. I mean, that's product managers do that as well, and in different aspects of leadership. But I think the thing that I still just love about engineering management is, in management in general, is the team aspect of it. I mean,
Right.
I can shepherd a team to solve way harder and bigger problems than I can solve on my own, and that's just extremely rewarding. And then I think, like, as I was uh, doing it for longer and longer, and I've hired so many people over the years, and just being able to hire people that literally are just exponentially better than you are at
Yeah.
something that you know how to do. It's inspiring to me,
Right.
being able to be an enabler for those kinds of people, and then watch junior people grow because you've put those people
Yeah.
together, and
Yeah.
now you've got this beautiful team ecosystem that's just like thriving, and it's really quite something to be able to shepherd.
Yeah. That's my favorite part, to be honest. I don't know if you ever played Baseball Stars on the Nintendo, but
I did not.
Baseball Stars, it was kind of a RPG baseball mashup where you could draft a new player, and they arrived with basically no stats, right? And then you developed their hitting and their running and all of
Nice.
this stuff. And I just see that, as a manager, I always loved, finding this person, whoever they were. Maybe they were a career changer, maybe they were, kind of first time programmer, and finding just the person who was right for the team, seeing them come into the team, flourish, grow, and now be way better at their job than I ever was. That's Yeah, I love that feeling. But Ray,
Indeed.
sorry, I cut you off with my
No, 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 no,
feelings of
not that.
joy. Sorry about
It's
that.
good. This is all good. I think no, I think those feelings of joy and the sort of general positivity is I think these to me are the kind of that's the attraction of management. The reason why I'm reluctant to get into management, to be completely honest, is because there's a lot of process around management, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
process around engineering, which I personally feel is generally total waste of time. But there are certain cultures, there are certain environments where some management teams will value numbers and sort of like I don't know, they value having a very like they want to go agile, but they don't want to have the spirit of agile. They want to plan for everything. They want to have deadlines. They want this, they want that, they want the other, which is just the opposite of agile. So I'm kind of like interested, Drew, and Josh as well. Actually, both can chime in here. It's like,
I mean, we're the same person, so
yeah,
either
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. It's like,
it doesn't matter which one answers.
yeah. You can probably multi-channel is stereo it, one sentence at a time, left, right. We get WoW to do a stereo
Or like human
effect.
LLMs. Yeah, just Josh, you say the next word, and then I'll.
Yeah, exactly. No, but seriously, I mean, how do you like square that off between this sort of this? I mean, maybe it's you're working in organizations which don't have those kind of cultures, so that would be great. But you tell me.
You go first, Drew. I have answers, but
Yeah, so one of the reasons why, I have not been as busy in the closure community over the many years is because I mean, leading teams and diagnosing processes and just management leadership in general, it's just such a fascinating um, rabbit hole that I've completely fallen down. I'm at the bottom. If there's a bottom of a rabbit hole, like, I'm at the bottom of it.
You're in
I
Wonderland.
there's
Yeah,
there's
I wonder.
more there's more hole below that, Drew, I
yeah,
find,
right,
as you
right.
keep digging.
Yeah.
found the cave underneath the rabbit hole, and I'm somewhere around there.
But Alice fell down a rabbit hole and landed in Wonderland. So that's,
Yeah.
I guess, where you are. Yeah.
I think all of us, have really, you probably have more experience working for an inefficient organization than we have in an efficient one. And so, I think, that's one of the things that I want to do as a leader is free up engineers to spend as much time actually solving the problems that they should be solving instead of dealing with the incidental organizational complexity. And so it there really is no perfect process. It comes down to the right people coming to good decisions and acting on them quickly. I mean, that's really the only process that works. Now, if time is not a factor, then, which is true in a lot of organizations, if you don't need to accomplish any specific thing by a certain date, then it really doesn't matter what your process is, because there's going to be a whole lot of other things that muddy the whole thing. But when you truly have an objective and you need to work toward that objective, having the right people communicating with each other and doing that often is really the it's going to work every time. And I think what you said about agile is really is right. People have basically put the agile label on a bunch of things that are not agile. I mean, the whole I basically just stated what agile is.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
if you go back to the original manifesto, I mean, it's basically like ship software often. Like that's really all it is. And have people talk to each other. I mean, it's really not. I think the problem with it is that it's not a process, and so people just want to put a process on things that they're ignoring, like having the wrong person in a position, or not giving feedback to people, solving the wrong problem and not owning up to that early enough. There's all kinds of like weird things we do as humans to kind of not maliciously. I mean, it can often be subconscious. It can be things that we're not even aware of. But we thwart things that probably could be a lot simpler, because we try to make it more complicated than it needs to be. Yeah, that's my hot take. Josh, what about you?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. There is one thing that's inescapable, though. A company of a certain size, let's just say, I don't know, 80 people. Companies above 80 people will have processes, like actual business processes, that are happening. So this is like outside of the engineering organization, right? Like bookkeeping has to be done, there's reporting and all of this stuff. And so a company at some point, even a technology company, there is this part of the company that has nothing to do with technology, right? So that it's a very different culture from engineering. And there has to be some kind of interface between these business processes and the engineering organization. And I think like really good engineering managers can be an interface to that. So what a good engineering manager can create an agile environment for their product team, where it's exactly as Drew said, you get the right people pointed at the right problem with the right support and kind of let them go. And like I said before, making sure that you're feeding in the information they need. Like, look, the business wants to do this. Okay, so if the business wants to do that, then maybe like we need to do this other thing, whatever. But also kind of, people ask for data when they're worried about something, right? Like, and we do the same thing as engineers, right? Like, I don't know how to solve this problem. Give me a bunch of data so I can stare at it and, have inspiration. Well, guess what? Like, the C-suite is the same way, right? If the CEO is worried about something, the CEO probably says, like, show me all of your process data for, how many stories per minute you're delivering or whatever. and and that's where you get into trouble. So again, like as a manager, your job is to have that conversation with like the senior management of the company to help them work through whatever it is that they're worried about, because maybe they are right to be worried, right? And maybe
Mm.
maybe you and your team need guidance, but you as an engineering manager have to be the person who can translate between that. So the team isn't just like, the CEO doesn't get us. It's like, well, no, but you don't get the CEO either. So that's kind of why I'm here.
That's right. Yeah, so I said sort of the pro engineering answer, right? Like get some smart people and like right get things out of their way. I'll now give the pro management response, which is, I mean, engineers are often terrible at providing information.
We all are, I think.
For yeah, that's true. For such a technical discipline, we often do not use data to drive decisions, to run our systems, to do a lot of things. I mean, if you want to look at a data driven organization, I would typically tell you to go to the sales department rather than engineering department, which is quite a condemnation on our slice of the industry. So I do think you're right that EMs are sort of that translation layer, but as managers, we can't do it all. We really have to coach engineers to really provide them the substance of those justifications and reasons and roadmaps. And, like, even though, I'm going to give you a working thing in 2 weeks or a week, here's where I'm going. And like, here's a couple of paragraphs about, the narrative of this thing that might take 6 months or a year. And writing that is challenging. I mean, a lot of engineers really struggle to fit the thing that they're working on into a larger story. And businesses really, they really deserve that, because, you've got decision makers at high levels that are dealing with an enormous amount of information. I don't think, kind of engineers in their daily work can appreciate just how much that your typical executive has to deal with. And being able to concisely state why something is worthwhile, what its progress is, how much it's costing, and what the value to the business is. That I don't believe that is solely up to the sort of quote unquote management. I think every engineer working on an effort should really be able to state that in some form or fashion if they were asked.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I always push back whenever somebody is like, oh, I want to be promoted to management. And I'm like, not a promotion, career change, because it is a totally different job. Now, having said that, so I think some of the things that really good engineers have do prepare them for that career change. And one of them is what you said: communication, narrative. I think like the thing that has been more responsible for whatever quote unquote success I've had in my career has just been my ability to communicate in English, not a programming language. And I always joke with people that like I am a programmer, but what I program is organizations, and the language I use is English. And gee, is that hard? That is really hard to do.
Yeah. What I wouldn't give for a compiler right about now.
Yeah, indeed.
It's well, you've got a dynamic language right there.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, before we do the context switch, Common Lisp, there is a command you can run at the REPL that has it recompile itself without ever stopping the runtime. So, Common Lisp for the win. But Drew, what are you up to these days post Elastic?
So I was going to take some time off and spend some time with my family. But I had
said, please don't, or what?
Well, this
they wouldn't let you.
Yeah, they're like, actually, we don't want to spend that much time with you. Can you please find a job? I got a call from a friend, Zach Smith, who had created a startup back in 2014 that was focused on bare metal hosting. So basically, taking the cloud style of consumption, but giving you literally a bare metal machine, not like, you know, a hypervisor that just has all of the resources on the machine, but um, like giving you like an iPixie, you know, interface into actually provisioning whatever OS you want on the machine. And it was very successful. It's called Packet. And we had actually used it at Elastic because we were um, we were making sure that we covered our bases from an architecture standpoint. And when ARM was starting to really gain a lot of traction, this was before like Graviton and Tau and sort of the cloud instances. But you know, ARM hardware was on the horizon, and so we needed to add that to our CI pool. And so Zach and his company, they had ARM machines through their partnership with Works on ARM and the Java builds of the JDK that builds on ARM. So that's how I first got introduced to them. And then they got acquired by a data center company in 2020. This company called Equinix, which, if you're like me, I'd never heard of them unless you, for some reason, you know, buy co-location space, and you would know about them. But I had been in the public cloud for, you know, many years, and so I didn't ever need to buy colo space or rent colo space. But Equinix is the largest, data center provider in the world. We have 300 some odd facilities in 70 plus markets, and we are often the we are often the building that probably this call is going through right now, and essentially brought Packet in to be to provide compute on their on the network backbone of the company, which is provides 70 to 80% of the world's internet traffic. So 10,000 enterprises, every industry is a customer. I mean, it's an amazing business and company. And so Zach talked me into joining to lead engineering for two products. One was what became their metal product, which was their business that they had before, and then another product called Network Edge, which is essentially a hosted VNF provider, which VNF stands for Virtualized Network Functions, which is basically a VM that has like a Cisco router instance instead of actually buying a big expensive Cisco router. And then I am not a networking expert. I am not a bare metal expert. So the sort of strategy in that hire was for me to come in with a lot of distributed system, large scale software development and operating systems at scale. And so because Equinix, for all its for all of its value as a data center company, it's still finding its footing as a software company. And so, having to sort of incorporate these products into the company was meeting certain challenges, and we wanted to expand and all kinds of things. So that was how I got to the company. And then through the course of trying to, expand these products and meet different customer needs, it was clear that we really needed to tackle the sort of the tech debt is probably a good way to describe it, but the company's been around a while and it hasn't had a modern take on sort of identity and access management. And so really that is like kind of the substrate of any good service ecosystem, is you've got to have that story pretty well defined. And so I decided to kind of focus on that problem, and it really was a better fit for my sort of background anyway. And so that's what I've been doing for the past year or so. Um, and and it's going great. We're consolidating, sort of kind of cleaning up the debt that had been accumulated, and we're just going straight, standards based interfaces, and building what should be really Equinix's story from a physical standpoint is a rich history of physical interconnection. All of the sort of major interconnection points in the world where you have different networks that need to talk to each other, literally, or if AT&T wants to talk to Amazon, talk to Google, that is a literal cables in a building somewhere. And it's most often it's Equinix that provides that. Well, if you think about the virtual space, the digital space, we need to provide that same sort of software ecosystem. Customers want to be able to build things at Equinix. They want to be able to build software, not just build out their colocation space. And so building a federated first model where you can basically just speak standard auth with everything is what we're doing, and it's a lot of fun.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And okay. So it's mostly, just to be clear, that's something that's an internal project at Equinix. It's not some external product that you're developing.
No, I mean, in the sense that, if you think of like I am in a cloud provider, like it's not really a revenue generating product, but it's very much a public, you got public APIs. It's kind of the thing that you have to do when you're stitching services together. I mean, how many of us have banged our head against the wall trying to figure out like how to appease the AWS, IAM roles to like make a multi-service thing work, right?
Just use the policy simulator. It always gives you the same results as real IAM, right?
Exactly. But the fact that you can do it is pretty amazing, and the process is just not good at Equinix right now. So that's what we're trying to fix.
Yeah. Brilliant. And that's Clojure stuff, is it?
So we have, yes, we do have sort of a kernel of functionality that is Clojure, that's written in Clojure. It's not dependent on Clojure, but basically how you register a service, how you sort of govern what can access what, and how you give tokens out to be able to authenticate that and authorize that access. That stuff is all written in Clojure. It's sort of like the service registry aspect of it, which is why it's interesting. You said earlier that AWS started sort of with that as its first service. That really is the sort of if you're going to build infrastructure and you really do want APIs all the way through, then you have to have that. So I call it a kernel, because you really do have to have like that seed where you kind of register everything. Because if you don't, then now you can't access it via an API, right? If you have any information that doesn't participate in that ecosystem, then you've got to figure out how to get it in the system, and you can't do it with APIs. And so that's it's been really interesting. We're not trying to build a cloud or be a cloud provider, but there's some of the same primitives there that we've had to bootstrap. It's really fun.
Well, I mean, if Clojure is rock and roll and management is country, this has been a little bit country, a little bit rock and roll, and I think maybe that's a good way to start wrapping it up. I mean, maybe I don't know, what would be your kind of like closing thoughts, Drew, about how Clojure has affected your work, or as a sort of developer, as a manager, as a sort of individual? What's your kind of like maybe we can like close on that?
Yeah, well, I just want to say that I really do owe my career to Clojure. It's been I really did not enjoy a lot of aspects of programming when I found Clojure. And that sounds, kind of an extreme statement, but it's
I think
really
it chimes
true.
very well. Yeah.
Clojure, Rich really did bring a lot of great things together in a very practical way. And so it really lit my, it allowed me to focus on ideas instead of, dealing with weird, just
memory allocation, etc.
Programming issues, right? Like I can't tell you the number of runtime errors in Python that have just, or packaging problems, or just all the stuff that we could spend a whole nother podcast talking about. And so I just want to say that, and I really just, the Clojure community is still like my gold standard for quality. I mean, it's just, since Clojure isn't the thing that gets taught in like boot camps, or is backed by Google, or like it's not. If you come to Clojure, like it's because you have hit a wall somehow, and you're like looking desperately for a solution. And so I feel like there's just that inherent bond in the between all of us in the community, where we really have found some measure of happiness, because we were able to finally, do things in a way that didn't make us pull our hair out. Does not mean that Clojure is perfect. I mean, obviously, anything you love, you could go on and on about the things that are not good about it. But I mean, it's
the
just
way they breathe,
Yeah. It's just on another plane as far as technology and just community, and it's still my my first love, as it were.
Wow. Beautiful words. I think with that, Drew, we should just thank you for teleporting yourself to Europe to be on DEFN. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you.
Thank you both. It's been an honor and really enjoyed it.
Fabulous. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of DEFN. And the awesome vegetarian music or the track is Melon Hamburger by Pizzeri. And the show's audio is mixed by Wouter Dullert. I'm pretty sure I butchered his name. Maybe you should insert your own name here, Dullert.
Puter.
If you'd like to support us, please do check out our Patreon page, and you can show your appreciation to all the hard work or the lack of hard work that we're doing. And you can also catch up with either Ray, with me, for some unexplainable reason. You want to interact with us, then do check us out on Slack, Clojurian Slack or Clojureverse, or on Zulip, or just at us at DEFN Podcast on Twitter. Enjoy your day, and see you in the next episode.
I'm the pro. I mean, it's like, two Indians and one chief here. Two chiefs and one Indian, even. Yeah. I don't know if that's still allowed as a sort of. Is that?
I don't know.
Would we get cancelled for that?
I wouldn't use it on the air.
Really?
Walter,
Okay.
make sure we get that.